Hello, in this video we're going to be talking about general information from meiosis, so let's not waste any of your time. Let's get right to it. Now when we're talking meiosis, right off the bat, one of the things we want to stress and make sure that we understand is that we are talking about the gametes. Meiosis is all about the gametes going through cell division. So we're talking the eggs and sperm. Everything else is called a somatic cell. That's the cells of the body. So things like your skin and all the various tissues and everything else that goes through mitosis only. Meiosis is just the sperm, just the reproduction cells, the eggs and sperm, and referred to as the gametes. Something else that we really want to specify is that cells that go through mitosis, the body cells, somatic cells, those are 2N. They're referred to as 2N. They're diploid cells. In other words, they have a set from both parents. Okay, both parents. So after fertilization, when the egg and sperm come together, whatever the organism is, now you have a zygote, you have a diploid cell, and so the gametes, the sex cells, they only have one set. That allows them to be able to, when the fertilization occurs, now they go back to a full set. You don't want more than a full set. That's when all kinds of conditions come into play, which we'll talk about in a later video. But mitosis, body cells, somatic cells, diploid, the gametes, the sex cells, meiosis, haploid, one set of chromosomes. Now here's just a diagram just to kind of summarize what we just talked about. We're talking about fertilization, we're talking about sperm and egg coming together, and you can see in the diagram beside me that the sperm has one set, the egg has one set, and when those two come together, okay, to make that zygote, the zygote is diploid. In other words, it has a set of chromosomes from both parents, and the bottom half of the diagram is the same, a little more picturesque. You can see the sperm cell there, you can see the egg cell, and when those come together, now the red and the blue, the zygote has a set of chromosomes from both parents. Okay, it's the same diagram. Don't be concerned by that. But this is referred to as a sexual life cycle. In other words, the life cycle is come about because of the fertilization process, and you essentially have an alteration in generations to where you go from diploid to haploid. When a zygote is formed, it's diploid. It lives out its life. Its body goes through the processes of making reproductive cells. Whatever the gender may be, if it's an egg or a sperm, and those are haploid, and that's what starts the next generation. So you go from a diploid zygote to a haploid reproductive cell, back to a zygote, back to haploid reproductive cells, on and on. You have, in organisms, you'll have things that are classified as diploid dominant, haploid dominant, and that just simply refers to is what's the major length of time that the organism spends in that generation. And for us, as we understand that we're diploid dominant. I mean, we live our entire lives as diploid organisms, and it's only for that few seconds that it takes for the egg and sperm to that start the process of the next generation. They're haploid, but once they come together, now you're back to a diploid, and that zygote, that offspring, lives its entire life as a diploid. So a much longer period of time is spent as a diploid organism. So we are in the diploid dominant life cycle. You'll have haploid dominant, where the organism spends a majority of its time, its life cycle, as a haploid organism, and you'll have a combination of the two, alteration of generations, which we'll talk about all three of those in a later video. Okay, but again, we want to stress this process of going from haploid to diploid. You can see here male and the female, again sperm and egg, haploid cells. Okay, they have just half of the chromosomes. It's not that they have all male or all female. The only male and female reference to is the 23rd chromosome, the gender chromosome. All the rest of the 22 are chromosomes that deal with the body structure, whether it's hair, skin, height, whatever it may be. But again, the two haploids come together, fertilization, forming the zygote, and you can see in the diagram on the far right, above that line is the haploid stages, and below that line is the diploid stages. So, but we also want to stress that eukaryotic cells, I mean, they can go through mitosis or meiosis, but they don't do both. Body cells don't go through meiosis. Sex cells don't go through mitosis. The stages and the structure and the process is very, very similar as far as what happens in metaphase, what happens in anaphase. And you'll see in a later video that the names are the same. The only difference is meiosis has 2 rounds of cell division. It starts out with those 23 chromosomes, and the haploid chromosomes are together. In mitosis, you just separate the haploid chromosomes, but in meiosis, you have the chromosomes from the mom and or dad. So you separate the homologous chromosomes, and then you separate the sister chromatids, and that'll be a point of reference when it comes to quiz or test questions. If the reference is to haploid or homologous chromosomes, then you're looking at meiosis 1, and if the question is about sister chromatids, you're looking at meiosis 2. But the end product is that you end up with 4 cells that are haploid and that are gamete cells. Now, a couple other things to think about. The idea of sexual reproduction. You're going to see when we break down meiosis 1 and meiosis 2 that a huge advantage of this type of reproduction is the variation that it creates in the offspring. And you can just look at any family. When we look at other organisms, like lions or tigers or bears, oh my, we kind of look at them and think, well, they kind of all look the same. And in generalities, maybe they do. But if you look at the individual traits, if you really stopped and studied, length of whiskers, eyes, mane texture. You will see differences, but it's certainly obvious in a human family that if you see a family somewhere and there's the mom and dad and they've got 3 kids. The kids are really different. They don't look, the boys don't look like the dad, the girls don't look like the mom. Everything is kind of a combination of the 2 parents, and that creates a lot of variety, and that's a huge advantage, that type of reproduction. The disadvantage would be that the mutation rates are slower, and meiosis offers some pathways to help kind of cover if there's any what we're going to call errors or anything that could be counterproductive to the lifespan of the offspring. And one of those you're going to see is recombination, and recombination can help because it swaps portions of the chromosomes between the parents. And where that can help is if for example, like cystic fibrosis. If cystic fibrosis, or if one parent either has cystic fibrosis or is just a carrier for cystic fibrosis, when you do the recombination, and again you'll see the crossing over and things like that, independent assortment, that can be covered up by the other parent maybe passing a healthy, we're going to use the word healthy, or a normal or a non-affected trait, or a gene I should say, for that particular trait. Well, that's our video over meiosis, general information. When we come back next time, we're just going to be looking at the process of meiosis. So we'll see you then.